We're all set. All right, pass the baton to you, Leslie.
Okay, welcome back. It was 2 short weeks, but long weeks for many of us who've been on the road in that time. Just to remind you, today's focus of our meeting, it's kind of that critical piece about finance and how we fund the services, in addition to some information, again, to give us some guidance and insight into the direction that we would recommend the town of Carefree go. So today's a big meeting. In fact, we could use the 3 hours allotted for today's meeting, and we're going to be covering a lot of territory, and it's important groundwork. Before we get to the minutes, I did also just want to thank Sheila and Peter for an enormous amount of work. So what you're going to see today that's going to help us move through this discussion is the work that Peter and Sheila have put into this. So both of you, hats off, and many thanks for your work. I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. And I know it's going to be top quality because of your leadership in that. So thank you both very much on that. Okay, why don't we take a look at minutes if you've got those, and I'll call for a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve with the changes that Carrie had emailed to all of us recently.
Okay. A second?
I'll second.
Agreed. Yep.
Jerry seconds. Any discussion?
Can I ask a question? On the original version, I haven't printed out the revised version yet, but on the 3rd page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about the 7th paragraph that begins with, the committee also assembled a list of recommended components for the town of Carefree Town Council. What does that mean?
Well, that was deleted, I believe, in the revised version because it's captured in the final paragraph.
Okay.
And it was our discussion, and simply that our discussion involved some more detail and focus on beginning to identify, define, and discuss options for moving forward.
Okay.
So it was a redundant statement in the original version that I had her remove.
I'm good with it.
Okay. Any other comments, discussion on the minutes? No. Okay, is all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, with that, is there anything before we get started? And I turn this over. I believe Sheila, you're going to walk us through this presentation today.
Yep.
Okay, I have one question. Peter, you did a piece of work, the background, essentially, that you then collaborated with Sheila on creating the presentation. Is that background information available? Gary?
Yeah, wasn't it sent out?
Yeah, it was sent out after the last meeting.
To everyone?
Yes.
To everybody.
Are you talking about the paper or?
Yes, I'm talking about your paper.
Okay, I thought it was sent out.
Yes, it was sent out, I believe, the day after our last meeting.
Okay, so that background paper, just to remind you all, you have received. So there's a level of detail in that paper that Peter put together, and I assume maybe it was Sheila's collaboration, but so for the presentation, it's a kind of more of a summary and walkthrough, I believe, of that. Sheila, correct me if I'm wrong.
Nope, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure you all understood. You'll have these slides. Also, those will be put up in the Google Drive, but you have the background paper as well to refer to on that. Okay, any other starting comments before we get going? Anything? Oh, okay, I turn it over to you, Sheila. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So we'll start with the presentation kind of outline, which will be covering the current revenue in the Carefree budget for fire. And then we will look at the revenue options for operations. And then we're going to look at the revenue options for the capital costs that we expect to have. And these are all based on the analysis from the paper that was sent out 2 weeks ago. Hopefully you have had time to review it, and I will be referring to that in one section of the paper. So we can move on to page 2 and look at, this is information that Gary shared with us at the very beginning of our process of reviewing our options and for a fire service. And what we can note from this is that the 1% sales tax has not been sufficient to cover the total cost of the master contract. And for the previous 10 years, the average structural deficit for the contract was just over $400,000. And looking to page 3, we can see, moving to page 3, we can see that we can expect that our costs for the next contract are expected to be higher than our current contract. That shouldn't be shocking. And based on the information that was in the background paper, we would expect those costs to be for automatic aid about $3 million. That's including automatic aid for not only the ongoing operational costs as well as initial capital costs, and up to $2 million for the initial capital costs. Sorry, $3 million for ongoing and $2 million for initial capital costs, but that is really dependent on what our partners request for automatic aid, as well as the cost of a new fire truck, which we don't know exactly what that is. If we choose mutual aid, we know that there will be an increase in the annual cost. We don't know, any final costs at this point, but we also have to be prepared for a new fire truck. And the two options to increase revenues are sales tax and property tax. So looking to page 4, we, in the paper that we looked at in the information we received in many of our past meetings, is that approximately $3 million will be needed for automatic aid, which is an additional $1.75 million in revenue over what we generate from the sales tax. If we were to look strictly at a sales tax, it would mean about a 1.4 percentage point increase in the sales tax, which would bring our sales tax, the city sales tax, to 4.4% with a total combined rate of 10.7%. Now, the advantages of this would be, it would be the simplest option because we already have a dedicated sales tax. Sales taxes do grow over time and follow economic activity. However, it would be subject to decline or minimal growth in recessionary periods. And it would not require the approval of Carefree voters. So moving to page 5, the drawbacks for the sales tax option is that, number one, it's not well aligned with the benefits received for fire protection. The beneficiaries of fire protection would not be paying for the protection directly. And if the sales tax were to significantly exceed the rate of surrounding communities, the economic activity could migrate to other lower tax jurisdictions. We also have to deal with the fact that there will be an annual escalator in the contract, and though the sales tax would grow with economic activity, it would be subject, as I mentioned earlier, to decline or minimal growth, possibly not keeping up with the escalator. And then there was, if everybody has page 6 of the paper that was put together on background, you can take a perusal of a chart that shows the different sales taxes for the different tax jurisdictions of Carefree, Cave Creek, Phoenix, and Scottsdale. And some of the areas that are highlighted are showing Carefree that's not competitive with surrounding jurisdictions. And if we go to page 6, we can see what the comparisons are. So we've got the state tax, the county tax, and then a city tax. So currently, Carefree is at parity with Cave Creek. However, it's substantially higher than Scottsdale and Phoenix. So we, have to take that into consideration, that we don't want to disincentivize Carefree residents or anyone to shop in Carefree, whereas we should try to incentivize people to shop in Carefree. And even though taxes are necessary, we want to make sure that we strive to minimize distortions in behavior when we're looking at tax solutions. So, but once again, there's no simple solutions, and all solutions do require trade-offs. So it's just something to consider, that we want to make sure that we minimize any distortions of behavior and keep the sales tax dollars coming into Carefree. So looking at page 7, from a property tax perspective, property taxes are a traditional source of revenues for local governments to pay for critical services. And the advantages of a property tax, number one, it's directly aligned with the benefit. So each structure would be responsible for their fire protection, full-time and part-time residents. It's a stable revenue source and diversifies the town revenues, which I think is very important for the stability and sustainability of town revenues going forward. And the Arizona legislature has placed several limits and transparency requirements that prevent runaway property tax bills, which I think people in general are already always worried about. And so I think there are really good limitations in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. And looking at page 8, the drawbacks to a property tax it's more complex. And in the paper, we do have a discussion about the different classes of property tax ratios. So it is obviously more complex. We currently do not have a property tax. It is unpopular due to the perception of runaway taxes, but I think that we can get over that with the current laws in the state of Arizona. The levy also imposes a limit by the state of 2% growth per year, which potentially couldn't keep up with the escalator in our next contract. And it would require approval of the town council as well as Carefree voters. So moving on to number 9, when you look at the limited property value for Carefree, it would take just under $1 tax to make up the difference from our current 1% sales tax. If we were to use the property tax solely for the contract, that would require $1.66 in property tax. These are based on our planning assumptions that are in the paper and things we've discussed over the past couple months. And there are 2 types of property taxes, primary and secondary. Primary is primarily used for governmental operations, and secondary is used to support bonds and special districts. So moving to number 10, looking at the just under $1 rate, the average home in Carefree would pay about $580 per year. And the burden for fire protection, which I think is very important to note here, is that the property tax would be about 75% on residential properties, 12% on commercial, and 8% on vacant land. Moving to number 11, looking at a comparison of property taxes in the surrounding jurisdictions as compared to Carefree. Cave Creek is at parity, Scottsdale has just over 1%, and Phoenix just over 2%. The Daisy Mountain Fire District, which we've discussed before, is close to 3.5%. And number 12, looking at the capital cost options, So if we choose automatic aid, you know, with all the meetings we've had, we were aware of the various costs associated with setup for automatic aid. It could be up to $2 million. We just don't know. But some of the options are, you know, we could use the town cash. However, that does reduce the transfers for general town capital needs, which is updating and maintenance of roads and other needs, which, you know, would put those, you know, capital needs pushed out into the future, which then you're looking at, you know, potential service declines. You could use the current sales tax for a period of time with the added property tax for full funding of the master contract, which would then provide a buffer on the cost coverage for the town going forward. And also the options for, you know, the capital costs up front, you could issue bonds, which would be property tax backed. And then you could use the property tax solely for operations and capital expenditures. Overall, that would be a higher tax rate than would be needed, but would provide room to accommodate the escalator in the contract. So there are a lot of options here that we have to consider. And looking at number 13, just the simple, any questions, concerns, or ideas that people have. There's a lot more information in the paper. So if you do have questions about that or ideas about what you've read there, you know, we're happy to discuss those as well.
Wow. That's a lot. I guess I would invite the conversation by just getting some, you know, initially some top line impressions of what material was presented in the report and that Sheila just walked us through. What are you walking away with when you hear this?
I could give you a comment if you'd like. First of all, a very, very good presentation. It was very efficient and a little bit mind-blowing then when you see all these figures. First of all, I really don't think that we can consider adding additional sales tax. I don't think that that sounds like a very good option. We don't want to put ourselves in a bad spot there in regard to the general area. But I think that we also are in a tight spot when we start having to consider property taxes. That's always been, and particularly Gary has always been, that was how he always let off, said, don't forget, Carefree has no property tax, which is definitely a plus. But we do have to keep up with what we're doing. And I think that in looking at some of the things where we have approximately $9 million in our reserve fund that is there, we are shorting ourselves on our sales tax about $400,000 a year, round figures here. And we are going to get from the government, from the feds, in year 22 and 23, approximately $450,000. Is that figure correct, Gary? About 4.5.
Gary, you're muted.
There we go. Yes, they have adjusted those numbers and they adjust them upwards, probably about $600,000. But there's strings attached to that has to go to infrastructure such as street improvements. So
would fire truck consider, would that be an infrastructure item, a push truck?
I don't have the answer offhand, but possibly, yeah.
Yeah, because I think if we say, okay, that takes care of a couple of years. I presume that when we get into a negotiation for a new contract, that we're going to be looking at something like we did before, 5 years with a potentially something, whatever, 5 on top of that. Is that what your kind of goal is, the 5-year starter?
Whether it be 5 years or 3 years, yes, with a automatic renewal for the same duration of time. So that's something that needs to be negotiated.
So if we take all of that in consideration and figure approximately we were giving rural metro about 2.5% each year in escalation. Is that about where it was?
That is correct, yes.
So we have to really figure that it's going to, I would say, based on what's happening with costs and everything, you're probably looking at almost double that today. I would say 5%. When I figure my own personal budgets, I've been adding 5% escalation, and I've had extra over the years. However, looks like we're going to catch up a little bit, this year. So it almost seems like to me that we can afford to take a little bit, if you will, from our reserve, if we can continue on with rural metro. We could take from the reserve with what we've got coming from the government and with what small interest I guess we might be getting from our funds with the state. That's where the roughly 9 million is right now, right?
And there's no interest.
Yes. The reserves for our capital projects are about $8 million.
Yeah.
And let me caution with those reserves, because they are there. We save and then we put together a larger project to get the economy of scale. They are there for our street maintenance. And we have approximately 110 lane miles of streets. Our streets are not getting any younger. In some cases, the asphalt is 40, 45 years old. And, we're putting Band-Aids in some cases on cancer. That's not going to work long-term. So, that's a whole nother issue to address is our capital projects. But what I'm trying to say is, as our asphalt ages, the cost to do the street maintenance increases because they need more sophisticated treatments.
Right.
So, for example, our next series of projects is going to look at a double treatment of a rubberized chip seal and then a slurry seal over top to create a wearing surface to deal with some of the older asphalt on the north side of town. That treatment to address that neighborhood, which covers probably about 20% of our roads in the northern part of our community, will be about $3.5 to $4 million. That's almost 50% of what we have in our reserves. And I have another 20% of our roads that we still have to treat. So we have to be cautious about digging into those reserves, because the purpose of that was to save to do these street projects, which I have been doing. And now I'm accused of saving too much money. Well, I got to save this money in order to create that economy of scale and package these projects.
Yeah, and this is a total small town way of life. This is what you have to do. You have to save the money up. And as you just mentioned, get the economies of scale. But, coming from a state that has not updated their roads in decades, which is California, it's pretty horrible. So it's a very important, and especially, in Carefree with how hot it gets, or Arizona, it's much harder on the roads. But this is the way small towns have to operate.
Well, I'm not proposing that we just keep using without any goal in sight. I think that what my purpose is, or what my thought is that if we can borrow, so to speak, before we get our pay from the government for the next 2 years, if we have a 3 or a 5 year contract, maybe this could get us over a hump and not have to propose a property tax at this point, and use that as part of the advantage of where we might end up in regard to our fire protection. Because I'm sure that once we get into the police and MSCO, we're talking about big dollars there again too, which obviously are a very important point. So I wasn't advocating that we just continue to drain that off and not paying attention to the situations that we're currently involved with in regard to the roads and so forth.
Okay, so let me see if I'm following here. So since the 600,000 or so from the federal government is basically earmarked for infrastructure. We might be able to use it for a fire truck, maybe. But otherwise, we would have to replace anything that we use from it because we're not talking infrastructure here. I mean, well, maybe we are. I don't know. But anything but beside the fire truck, we'd have to think about having to replace, I think. And even under the current contract, we've got, I think we were at 1.5 million now with, what was it, $300,000 shortfall, I believe, roughly. So that's going to go up even if we stay with rural metro. And if the, a 4% increase a year when on the 1.5 million is about about a 15% increase on the deficit every year. So it's not obvious to me that we're going to be okay with sales tax, even if we stay with rural metro. I mean, it seems like we get a pretty big deficit pretty quickly here.
Yeah.
I want to ask one other piece, and Gary, I don't know how widely this has been shared, but you have been successful in collecting some estimated cost data. Is this the time to bring that forward so that we can embed that in this conversation about funding sources? It seems to me that it would be appropriate. Do you want to spend a moment on that?
Sure, we could do that.
So you recall from the last meeting, we asked Gary to come back maybe and see if he can get some additional information on just what cost would we be looking at so that we can have a more informed conversation about how we fund it.
So hopefully we can try and get this out of here. There we go. Does everybody see this slide?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I went to Scottsdale Fire Department, SFD, Daisy Mountain Fire Department, and Rural Metro. There are, I believe, representatives all on the line today as well as previous meetings to ask them, hey, can you give me a ballpark figure? What are we looking at for the first year? And then what are some one-time costs that we may need to be cognizant about if we join your respective departments? And so both Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain, as you know, are part of the automatic aid, and Rural Metro is mutual aid. So there's some one-time startup cost if we go in that direction of automatic aid with both Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain. Some of those costs are uniform and some are unique to the respective organizations. As you can see, Rural Metro, there's no startup cost. We just continue with our respective contract. But looking at the top of that table there, the ongoing costs, and this is just the initial year. This is not just future years, but just year one, the respective costs. So personnel services. So Scottsdale has estimated 18 firefighters on rotation within that fire station we have at a cost of about $2 million, $2,050,000. Daisy Mountain is looking at about $1.85 million. The dispatch and radio fees are uniform. That's the automatic aid fee. And then there's some indirect costs, assumed indirect costs with both agencies, and it depends upon the level of service and what their governing entity sets as far as policies and uniforms and other things that support those firefighters, what their programs are. So the costs vary about $200,000 between Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain. So you're looking at a delta of approximately $500,000 between Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain. Over to the right, you see Rural Metro. They're looking at an increase of their current master contract, which this year we will pay about $1.55 million. They're looking at if we negotiated a contract. And once again, these are ballpark figures. They're subject to change. This could be less, this could be more, but this is that ballpark estimate that each entity provided me. We're looking at about $1.9 million. So an increase of approximately $400,000 over what we're paying today. Now recall, between 2010 and 2020, we had an average annual structural deficit of $407,000. You add another $400,000 there, we will have a deficit perhaps up to $800,000 per year, depending upon what we collect with that 1% dedicated to the master contract. So that's a significant concern, even if we stay with rural metro. If we go with Daisy Mountain, add another $400,000 to that. That's now at $1.2 million. If we go with Scottsdale, we're even at a higher number. So these are the concerns from a funding perspective, that we're looking at a significant investment ongoing. The one-time investments, Scottsdale's looking at investment up to $684,000 for training of their personnel, getting the appropriate equipment, the personal gear. The dispatch and assumed indirect costs are associated with joining automatic aid and subscribing to that respective program in the radios, et cetera, so forth. So they're both uniform there between Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain. But about a $350,000 difference between the two there. So at the end of the day, total cost for the initial year, City of Scottsdale, you're looking at approximately $3.5 million. Daisy Mountain, you're looking at approximately $2.9 million. And rural metro, you're looking at $1.9 million. So those are the overall numbers. Once again, those are the ballpark figures that were shared with me. They're subject to change, but that's what we know at this point in time.
Gary, just a clarification, if I'm not mistaken, what rural metro offered, again, I want to emphasize also, and for the record, and thank the providers for being willing to give us some numbers to work with. But these are simply ballpark. They may mean nothing in the final analysis. But so with rural metro, that was based on a 3-year contract. And because the contract expires in June of 2022, we would be looking at entering into a new contract, right?
That is correct. And one of the things that was suggested to me by rural metro was that initial 3-year contract, they could perhaps look at no inflationary index that will be locked in at that $1.9 million figure. The reason why is this is a labor-centric contract, and they are negotiating with their union, and this new rate would cover that contract over the next 3 years. And after that, they would have another negotiation with their union. And that's why they would want a second bite of the apple at year 4. So we would be locked in most likely at that respective number with rural metro.
That's a guaranteed number for 3 years. I mean,
I don't want to say guaranteed right now.
Well, I meant, yeah.
Yeah. That's what they're looking at, yes.
Directionally, it's fixed for 3. Okay. So let's discuss, to make it digestible, maybe we can discuss what the financial world would look like with rural metro first. So we got about 1.2 million in sales tax coming in, or something like that, versus 1.93 cost with a new contract. So we'd have a deficit of about $750,000 a year. That's going to hit us as a real number that we have to make up pretty quickly. So that's either a big sales tax jump still, or a property tax, I believe. Jerry, do you still have the opinion that sales tax increase is sort of, I'm kind of with you there, that a sales tax increase is probably not a good way to go. But otherwise, that implies that we're putting on a property tax on the ballot to keep what we have, I believe, unless I'm misreading this, unless there's some other option here.
I think we're probably, the big thing that we might be overlooking here is one thing. Either I think we have to decide, do we want to go with automatic aid, or can we agree that mutual aid has taken care of us in the past, and looking into the future, for the foreseeable future, to be able to hold our own, that is the more well, one of the two choices, in other words. I think that if we start there, then we know that we are or aren't going to be able to reach some sort of an agreement with Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain.
I guess I'm not sure I followed you. I'm not prepared to start with, do we want mutual aid or do we want automatic aid? Because for me, part of the discussion is, I mean, to me right now, just looking at it, what's in my head is, we're going to have to propose a property tax, probably to continue with mutual aid at least within a couple of years. And in that case, we're putting something on the ballot to keep what we have. Or we can propose a somewhat larger property tax to switch for automatic aid. And then what the people are voting for is something we don't have. So to me, it makes a difference whether it's property tax versus no property tax, or whether it's property tax or slightly larger property tax. And it looks to me like we're talking property tax or slightly larger property tax.
There's another piece too, Gary. I was just curious if, in terms of thinking about estimates, just where my mind goes, it would be helpful to see more of it all in. Like, I'd like to see that fire truck listed on here somehow, that we have costs associated with fire protection beyond these costs here, correct? Am I correct in that? So
yes, there's certainly some capital costs, capital assets that could be updated and funded through this that are not part of this right now.
This, to be complete in my mind and to be able to get my head around the whole picture, knowing those capital costs and what our estimated budget might be for the capital costs would be a part of that. So, and I think it's important from a public education standpoint. And then the other question was, as I understood it, there are costs for Carefree associated with becoming part of automatic aid. And are those covered in these figures, or is there work over and apart from contracting with an automatic aid provider, that there's something we have to do that's separate and apart from that may involve costs? Did I understand that correctly in earlier conversation?
The costs are captured within these proposals.
Okay.
Now, we don't know if there's something that they haven't gone into our fire station, they haven't evaluated. When I say they, either Daisy Mountain or Scottsdale, as of this date, have not gone into our fire station and seen the equipment that we have to assess whether there's any other infrastructure we need to upgrade. But we do have quite a bit of infrastructure that supports automatic aid. So I'm not too worried about additional infrastructure.
Okay.
It's mainly the radio equipment and the dispatch requirements that we have to upgrade to be part of automatic aid. So we're pretty well set, whereas Cave Creek doesn't have that infrastructure, and that's some of their biggest upfront costs.
Okay, so I guess in my thinking, we're just missing the cap expense to this picture. And if we added it into this picture, what might it look like? Would we use a cap figure of 2 million as was suggested in the presentation? Does it come in closer to $1 million? Is it in the first year? Or
that 2 million was some bells and whistles, such as a brush truck and equipping a brush truck. We don't have one today, so if the community wants a brush truck, that's an added cost. But for the most part, it's that new fire truck and some of the equipment that we have to upgrade associated with our current fire station as it ages in place.
So I would, in my mind, I'd say, okay, split the difference between 1 million to use 1.5, whatever figure we use in there. I have to add that into these figures I'm seeing here, so that our fire program in total, operating and cap investiture, would be close to 5 million under the Scottsdale, right? Would be close to 4.3, and this is in year one.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm just looking for a bottom line figure, because, and I always think it's important to get all the information up front rather than leak it out slowly. You know, I mean, then you just develop some.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that. But for instance, the brush truck, there's no reason why that would have to be in year one that I know of, right?
No.
Right.
No.
And the other fire truck, I don't know, maybe it's a year one, maybe it's a year three. I don't think we ever quite got to the bottom of that either.
Well, and if you're talking about that kind of a capital expenditure, you could probably also do a lease purchase to spread the purchase cost over a couple of 3 years.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
You know, that's possible, but
yeah. I think we actually have three numbers we need to look at, right? We've got the ongoing, which is every year, 1.9, 2.3, 2.8 plus, you know, growth. We've got the automatic aid one-time cost, which would be first year, which is either 683, 515, or 0. And then we've got additions to our capital, which is ish 1.5 million, which might be year one, year three, spread over 3 years, starting in year two. We don't know exactly. But those are the three numbers we have to deal with. The only one that doesn't matter to a recommendation, except, well, I shouldn't say that. It matters to a financial recommendation. But as far as making a choice, the trucks, I don't think matter. I think we would probably, I don't know for sure. Maybe we would buy a brush truck under mutual aid and not under automatic aid. But I think that's a separate discussion, though, just that last number, whatever it is, I think.
Yeah, I just think
that's the way it seems to me too, that we either are going to have to buy a fire truck sooner or later, and whether we do a bush truck, then that's, again, I think that's an option. I agree with you on that.
Okay. All right, so
Gary, a question, I'm sorry, real quick, on the rural metro 3-year contract figure, and that's the annual 1.9. Is that on current staffing levels? Is that based on that?
That is correct.
Okay. And did rural metro ever get back with you about the fact that an initial analysis that you had provided showed that Carefree was paying more per fire employee, quite a bit more than Fountain Hills, for instance, which is much larger?
Yes, and I have not followed up on that.
Okay.
So one other piece, Gary, do I understand also that the rural metro figure, the estimated figure here, was based on current service levels, but there was another number if, as they read, the service levels are lower in the Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain than what we currently, is that?
So if this was just straight personnel, carve out all the services that Rural Metro currently provides us, they could do a straight staffing with no bells and whistles of approximately $1.5 million.
So the bells and whistles, what, can you give me an example? I mean, I know we've seen grant making, we've seen some community pieces.
Correct.
I mean, and so
yeah. all the value added services. So from the CPR program to the blood check tests to the more important ones, which is the fire marshal service, the investigative services, the services where they go out and they do the brush checks of people's homes, lock boxes, and other things that they provide to the community. So these are things that most fire departments provide today, and Rural Metro provides that to us today through this current master contract. But if you just wanted a focus more so on the labor and less so on those value-added services, you're looking at 1.5. But I think you would be doing the community a disservice if you went to that bare bones approach.
And is the value added, are those value added services part of Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain's service?
They actually, I think this is just their firefighters. They did not provide lines that said fire marshal services, emergency management services, you know, the CPR and other classes that are provided through Rural Metro. I have not had any discussions with them over that, but I would think that they would look at some compensation for that level of service in addition to what they provided here.
So that's important to me in hearing that the 1.9 that Rural Metro has given us to work with is business as usual as we've come to expect it. But under Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain, we don't know. I mean, yeah, from what you're saying, there are additional costs on top of what we're seeing here if we want the same level of service that we've been getting.
Right. Now, these are some of the things that we can negotiate into a contract and include within perhaps this pricing, because they still have the firefighters there. They can still conduct those CPR classes, for example, at the fire station. But something as fire marshal services, that's, you know, brings another employee into Carefree. There's time, there's labor associated with that. There's labor associated with investigations. So, you know, that will increase the price of the contract.
Okay, so, and I agree with, I'm prepared to take Gary's recommendation that with Rural Metro, we don't back up on services. So the 1.934 is a number we should probably use. Right. But I also agree with Leslie that if we're going to compare, we need apples and apples. So we need to find out what happens to the Daisy Mountain and the Scottsdale numbers if those get added in before we make a comparison.
I can say with confidence that the price is going up, not down.
Okay, well, how much, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we can see in rural Metro, they're pricing those services at about 430,000 for those value added services. That's the price tag technically Rural Metro is kind of using.
Yeah, and I get that, and I guess that was what occurs to me too in my head. But I'd like to ask the question. It might be that there's some level of that they include a standard and didn't mention. You know, we need to check. But it's certainly not going down. You know, another question I have is, we're going to have an annual cost, and we're going to have a first year cost. And it doesn't seem to me obvious that, or a first year cost plus a fire truck and capital equipment cost that is early, but I don't know what year. It's not obvious that whatever we do it's not, I guess I don't know, but I'm assuming that when we talk about sales tax increase or property tax, we're talking about recovering the ongoing costs, and certainly not the year one cost, but I don't know what options we have for covering that, let's say, well, 1.5 to 2 million, maybe. Other than, would we anticipate a bond that we would then include in a property tax or a sales tax, or would we?
I doubt that a municipality could issue a bond for $1 million. Your issuance cost is going to be, as a percentage of your principal, just ridiculous.
So alternatively, we could take it out of our reserves and then pay it back as if it were a bond from our property tax or sales tax that we used to cover the fire.
One other thing that you can think about is because the state imposes a levy limit growth of 2% a year, basically. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but it's 2% a year. If you go to a property tax, it would seem to me that you'd want to build in a little. Now, the levy limit will grow at 2% regardless, as if you levy to it. So you could set a $100 levy levy $80, but the levy would still grow by 2%, if you understand what I'm saying. So you could set a levy that is a little bit high to pay for some or all of your one-time costs, and then back that off after you've gotten it from the property tax. But the levy limit would grow, because I'm not sure that we can assume that any of these contracts would only grow at 2% a year. And I'd be afraid of outrunning, that the expenditures would outrun our revenue source. So it's a thought. I mean, it's how you would put something like this together.
Okay, I understand that, but so building in some extra up front. I mean, if you're trying to raise $2 to $3 million a year, and you build some extra into it up front, it's not going to cover a $1.5 million expenditure up front.
Well, I mean, you'd have two options. One, you could put half of that on the property tax. The other option would be you could leave the 1% sales tax to run for 2 more years.
Okay.
You can move the deck chairs around about any way you're going to do it. But the takeaway from this seems to me to be, there ain't no way we're going to be renewing contracts and replacing our fire truck with no tax increase.
Exactly.
I mean, you can wish it, you can hope for it, you can do a lot of other things. And now you're just picking between two poisons. Do you want a sales tax or do you want a property tax? And then we can dicker over the price and how to work in the long term or the one time versus the ongoing, and ensure that we have the capacity in the tax base to do that. I mean, I was reading that old 2012 report again the other day. And in 2006, the average home at 3,000 square feet in Carefree was paying a subscription price of $900 plus. 900 and I take that back, $750. And if we do kind of the minimum on the property tax here, the average, based on the calculations that have been done, is like $580. And that's 15 years later.
Right.
If you look at the property tax, if we were in Daisy Mountain in the fire district, which they don't have any option, they're paying basically $3.50. Okay, we're talking about getting away with 97 cents to $1.66. And with the average house, in Carefree at over $500,000. I mean, we're in the top tier of zip codes in this state. It doesn't seem to me that somewhere between $600 and $900 is a deal breaker. And if you go back and roll back some of the sales tax, perhaps over time, the 1%, you might step that down over time. It's
right. And I do like, by the way, Peter, I appreciate that. I do like the idea of running them both for a year, because you can raise almost all the money you need for one-time expenditures that way. That seems like a really solid idea. Now, but to do a property tax, we have to get residents to vote for it. So
yeah, it's a heavy lift.
If I may chime in,
please do.
So, obviously being here the last 18 months and working closely with buyers and sellers, especially in Carefree and living there, there's not been one person for people that are buying, moving into the area, whether it's from other parts of Arizona or outside the state, that can't believe how low the taxes currently are. And with the home prices almost doubling in the last 4 or 5 years, the average home price now in Carefree is at $812,000 to be exact. I think that a property tax is not going to deter anyone from buying here that hasn't bought, or when they sell, that they're going to get less money for their house. I think their property value will continue to grow with the demand here being so high in the areas of Carefree and Cave Creek. Whether the people will vote for it or not is another thing, but I think it's such a minimal thought in the scheme of things of raising money that I think that is something that property tax we should definitely do. As far as the sales tax goes, obviously, we work locally with the chamber and a lot of the businesses here, and we talk to them on a regular basis. I know that, you know, we've proposed, you know, just in conversations with a lot of the business owners here locally in Carefree, like, listen, if there was a, you know, sales tax, do you think it will drive away your business? Or people, instead of having a burger, you know, at Harold's or Buffalo Chip, is going to go down to Scottsdale to save a buck, you know, or two? It's just not going to happen. So my thought process, and at least what I'm experiencing hearing on the ground, you know, no one ever wants to pay for anything. We have to keep up with inflation. We have obviously all these other capital improvements for the town that are already slated, and we're running at a negative. So I think the sales tax is something that should be done and increased to 2%. Whether we can take that off the books in a few years, you know, remains to be seen. And I would propose and vote for, whether we stayed with rural metro or went with automatic aid, that we do the sales tax increase where we don't need a vote. And then we propose the property tax, you know, based on what we think we'll get in from that additional 1% each year, and maybe take 10% off that for planning purposes. Then we could say this is what we would propose for, you know, a sales tax, you know, the following year, because in June it's up and we have to make a decision. And obviously these are the only two places where we're going to get the money.
Yeah, and Philip, I think that's it brings up a really good idea, which I think is was the point of what you're saying. Increase the property tax and then put something on the ballot to impose to vote for a property tax to allow us to reduce the sales tax. I think that politically sounds like a smart way to do it. Not that I'm a politician.
So what you're saying is that you would have an 11.5% sales tax in Carefree?
It's 10.5 now?
No, it's 9.3.
So, oh, okay. But I'm saying, I thought it was the sales tax was 1% for Carefree.
Oh, okay. So the sales tax dedicated to the fire fund is 1%. So you're saying,
oh, got it. Yeah. All right. So,
okay.
So I would.
So then that would bring it over 10%, which I think that, you know, as I said before, you know, taxes have incentives and disincentives. And I don't think that right now the sales tax is really changing behavior of people's shopping habits. But I think you get over 10%, and that is a different story. And so many of the small businesses in Carefree are not, you know, the Buffalo Chip or a large restaurant. So they're very small businesses like Bosco's Biscuits. And there's many places to get dog food or cat food. Sorry, not anything wrong with cats. But, you know, that's a small business, and we are putting a burden on the small business that is, to me, the responsibility of a homeowner of having fire protection. So I don't feel that we should burden our small businesses any more than we have to pay for something that we are all individually responsible for, or should be. And the cost of public services is high. I mean, public safety is expensive.
Oh, and I agree 100. I agree 100%, Sheila, 100% with you. But I think we have to get it from somewhere. And first of all, the sales tax. If we go with a property tax increase, and we're not going to do the sales tax, it's going to have to be obviously higher than if we had the combination of the two. But I still don't think it would defer or deter, should I say, you know, people from, you know, voting yes. Some people obviously vote no. I think if you look at the medium income in Carefree and what people make, and the taxes are so low, if we can push it through where that can cover automatic aid or staying with rural metro, then mutual aid, then, you know, that's fine too. I do agree in that sense, everyone's kind of sharing it equally in the sense of that being homeowners, right? Because it's all about fire, you know, police and EMS. So, you know, if we could get that, you know, on the ballot, if it doesn't pass, then you're going to have to go the sales tax because there's no other way to do it.
So, yeah, I did to that point. There's the logistics of getting this before the council, getting the council to approve a ballot measure for May, getting that ballot measure passed and implemented. We still have a gap. My concern is how we manage the fact that this contract expires in June of 2022. and we're laying this process on. I mean, I don't know what kind of choices we would have in the short run, assuming that we will not see the revenues. Even if we are successful with a property tax, we won't begin seeing the revenues to cover this. So there's a cash flow issue. But assume maybe we're not successful. It doesn't pass this first go around. It's going to take a couple of run-ups. And then we've contracted out and committed to these, some of these levels. How does that, I mean, that would be a scary place to be, I would think. Anyway, I just, I want to test something because I am hearing, I think in the conversation, and unfortunately on my screen, I cannot see everyone at one time. I see 5 of us. So my apologies, because we still have this other slide on the screen. If I'm missing anyone, and I invite you to just simply speak up. Oh, there we are, okay. I'm hearing in this conversation so far, you know, some agreement that we can't move forward on this and continue the kind of risk for the structural deficit we've run and that we're looking to almost double, at least at a minimum. We can't, without a property tax. And I just want to test that in those that are here, that
well, okay.
Is there any? Yeah.
So because we're all thinking our own thoughts and we're not, so yeah, it is worth checking. First of all, I agree with Sheila that sales tax isn't as well aligned to the services as a property tax would be. I wasn't, it looks to me right now like we're going to need a property tax at least to supplement the sales tax, even with rural metro. Right. If that's true, then I would rather, and I think this is where Sheila was, I would rather have the property tax cover the entire fire protection because that is better aligned, and either reduce the property tax or use it for something else. That's kind of my starting point, and I that's kind of new to this meeting, but I sense that's where Sheila is too. Is that right, Sheila?
Yes. Yeah. I just think the alignment issue is very, very important, and Peter, you know, has done a lot of work on this as well. But as Gary mentioned, expenses are going up. They are not going to be going down in the future. So we need to be prepared. And to me, I will tell you, I'm fiscally conservative after spending 35 years watching state and local governments manage in public policy, and you know, so I am fiscally conservative, and I believe that we will eventually have to have a property tax in Carefree, no matter what. I know it sounds horrible to some people, but I think that in order to have a sustainable future, a sustainable budget, we need to have a diversified source of revenues, and I can't think of a better reason to have a property tax than to have it for fire protection, since every structure needs fire protection, whether you're a full-time resident or a part-time resident, we need fire protection. So to me, the alignment of these two factors are well aligned.
Okay. We also have a conversation coming up after we put this to bed as much as we can in the next couple of months, which is the public safety more generally and our contract with MCSO. And we don't know yet what's waiting for us in that conversation. So it may be some sort of public safety focus for a property tax in there. But anyway, to that point, yes, I agree. I don't see how we're going to move forward even we did nothing. Yeah.
Leslie, I'm not sure I understood. Are you saying that we may have reason to fund something else in the public safety arena out of a property tax? Okay, so if we have a 2% increase a year limit, then don't we kind of want to wait to vote when we know what the total bill is and have the residents vote once? I'm not sure. I mean, I know that doesn't fit with our needs.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't have my mind clear on this in terms of what the actual ask is. You know, like what does the language of a resolution say that gets this on the ballot? I don't know yet. I mean, we've heard a lot of good discussion, but what's the magic number that serves us best moving forward? Is it 1.6? Is it 0.97? Is it 2? You know, what is the number we would use for a property tax?
Yeah,
I'm just trying to push.
there yet.
We're not there, right? So I'm not going there yet, but I am hearing some agreement that we are going to move forward, and our recommendation from the committee will be a property tax. We don't see how to move forward without a property tax. That I just want to test for that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead, and Leslie, I'm in agreement completely. Moving here too about a year and a half ago from the Denver metropolitan area, it's amazing how affordable property tax is here, kind of like Phil suggested. I can't imagine that either existing or future residents wouldn't, for fire safety or public safety, go ahead and authorize some kind of minimal increase, knowing also that the state of Arizona is not allowing that to go beyond a certain point. So I'm definitely in complete agreement with that. And I'd like to thank Peter and Sheila, your report, your background, your presentation, everything. It's just been so helpful in trying to decide this financial situation. And on first bluff, when I'm looking at your recommendations or the suggestions, the choices, to me, what comes up as the most reasonable currently would to be leave that 1% sales tax in place for whatever period of time it's needed, and then also propose the property tax. So that's where I'm sitting at this point.
And Gary, do you think it's up to this committee to do the deeper nuts and bolts on what's the kind of formula for that balance? Is it for us to suggest details?
Certainly, you know, it's up to the committee to decide that, but it would be helpful for the council to get probably some options to discuss, so that they could have a more fruitful conversation when they're making that consideration.
Okay. So it sounds like that the options that if say our goal is to have 3 options for the council to choose from, right? How we develop those and flesh those out. But that each of those 3 options would include a property tax. Is that what I'm hearing?
I would
say that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So then it's just a question of the levers that we suggest are used in each of those options in terms of the rates of property or sales tax and how those are used. Okay. Okay. Any ideas? Sorry, go ahead.
I also like the idea of, in the end, reducing the sales tax so that we can use the overlap period to fund the one-time expenses like the fire trucks.
Right. Okay. Okay. How do you suggest? I'm not quite sure because there's quite a level of detail in fleshing those options out. How would you like to proceed as a committee of volunteer citizens to actually put the language into those options?
We have once we get closer to final numbers, then, you know, we know what the budget is for the first year for the 1% sales tax, and we can then work from there.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of ways do we do a subcommittee? Do we set up a team or task some folks with fleshing these out? That's my question. How do we bring these ideas back to our next meeting where we have something to reflect on? Does anyone want to take a stab at?
Well, I think that there's, ooh, sounds like a big dog.
Sorry.
I think working the numbers out is pretty much, I mean, yes, there will be options. You keep the sales tax for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. Do you go to the total $1.66 or you go to 97 and all of that sort of stuff? But I think that what it's more important is that we start honing in on what are we talking about in contracts? So one of the things that we talked, and I was in and out on the last meeting, but you wanted to base a report over the, largely on top of what happened in 2012. And 2012 had 3 proposals. And I guess one of my questions would be that I think there's some uncertainty in the numbers that have been proposed to us. And I think that it would be valuable for person X or people X, whether that's staff or probably staff, to meet with those folks and find out a little bit what's under the hood there. I think we need to get a better, I personally am still confused about automatic aid. And what I'm confused, I understand there's a dispatch call, but if one of the advantages of Scottsdale is that they have fire stations that are close to our southern and eastern border. One of the advantages of going with automatic aid on our western side, if Daisy Mountain takes that over, is that the western side is difficult for us to address. I don't know what the volume of calls will be on the south and the east that Scottsdale will respond to, and what our ratio of calls that we respond to versus what Scottsdale or Daisy Mountain is responding to. What is the automatic aid governing body, whoever that may be? Might they say, whoa, boy, look at the ratio of calls between jurisdictions here, and maybe you need another firehouse. I don't know that yet.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of disappointed that Rural Metro hasn't gotten back to us. I thought we asked during their presentation for a breakdown of all their numbers, including our calls outside of the jurisdiction and other jurisdictions, may it be the Cave Creek Station into our jurisdiction. I'd like to get a better handle on what the call volume is. We kind of got some.
Gary, do we have that slide?
I don't have a slide on that, no.
So we did get some of that back, I think, Peter. At least I saw an email. Is that correct, Gary?
Yes, there was one email. It was from Jim Ford that outlined some of our.
Yeah, but wait a minute. We're contracting, for my friends in Rural Metro that are on the line. We contract with you, okay? Can we get some statistics on what we paid for? And they were asked for that. I'd like to see that happen. Where after the close of the year, I don't know how long it takes to get an annual report put together, but we ought to have that. We ought to have the last 2 years so we have a better understanding. Because I don't know, when Scottsdale first went in with City of Phoenix and they downstaffed some fire stations, City of Phoenix got pretty upset about how many calls they were running into Scottsdale. And I feel I need a better understanding of what that balance may be and what are the charges, because I've heard that, oh, you don't pay for services, but then I heard that there's a settlement at the end of the year and you can get a credit or a debit. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about the automatic aid and what the financial implications of automatic aid are. I would still also like to have a better idea of what the various departments think we might have to bring to the table in terms of equipment. There's the question of do we need another firehouse, depending upon where the calls are going. I just don't, or maybe you can contractually deal with that with Scottsdale if you deal with them, or Daisy Mountain if you deal with them. I'd like to get a better kind of handle on equipment. Is the brush truck something that we're going to be realistically having to talk about? Or, what do we bring to the table for automatic aid? Or what might they say you need to ante up on? Then there's, so just getting a better understanding of the whole AA financial structure and obligations. I'd like to have a better idea. I'd still like to put together and it was discussed for the report, an advantages, disadvantages, or comparison between mutual aid and automatic aid. So when I'm talking to the guy at the grocery store and he says, well, I don't know why we're going with automatic aid, it seems to me we ought to have an answer if that's the way we're going. And right now it's kind of fuzzy. I'd like to see that kind of pulled together. The other question that I have is, if we go to automatic aid, well, I guess I have come to realize that the ambulance service is actually a revenue stream. And I think that perhaps we're benefiting from that revenue stream with rural metro having both the CON for ambulance and the fire department, because that gives them a revenue stream for the dispatches that they send out both the truck and the ambulance on. I don't know what happens if we split vendors. When you want to call an ambulance, are you still calling the same number and you can get the fire department or the ambulance, because they have two different dispatch situations? And I don't know how that works. Are we going to be fumbling, getting calls moved from one to the other? What is the response time that we would be, is there a change in response time if we have that? If we're talking about CON, I don't know how big a revenue stream that is. I don't know how important it is to rural metro. I'd like to get a better idea of that. And then, I mean, if it's substantial enough, maybe we ought to talk to rural metro about buying their CON or applying for our own CON. I don't know, because I don't have a quantification on that. So, I mean, I think that we still have a little bit of work to do. I think that some of the estimates that have been provided could probably be scrubbed a little bit. I'm not saying that they're outlandish, but there are some pretty big differences between Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain. And there were boxes that were drawn across that, and that might be $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. I don't know why they're different, but that would be something I'd like to kick the can on. But I guess the fundamental question is, and all of that can be preceding a proposal. When they did it in 2012, they included 3 proposals. Are we going to ask for proposals? Hard numbers that they're willing to say, this is it. Or are we going to go to the town and say, well, we kind of think it should be automatic aid and it could be between this and that, and we think you probably ought to use the property tax, and then let all the rest of that work happen beyond us. I mean, those are the kind of choices, but I think that we could use at least 1 or 2 more meetings to collect some of this kind of data. And
okay.
And can I just touch in there too? I have some of these same confusions about automatic aid, such as, let's say, for instance, here, Daisy Mountain is coming in less expensive for the 2 automatic aid providers, but proximity-wise, they're not as close to some of our borders. However, on automatic aid, does it really matter if they're going to send the closest fire engine anyhow, which will come out of Scottsdale? So that is a confusion for me as well. And I don't know, Leslie, too, if it's a possibility of maybe splitting into subcommittees of teams of 2 to flush out each of the 3 service providers, and then another team of 2, perhaps with Life Safety Council, to try to figure out what it is that will make Carefree become part of automatic aid if they wanted to, and at what point that it could occur, and if it depends on the partners, and if it depends on you have to have more than so many fire stations. I just don't know.
So I'm for me, and I'm on the same track as Kim, but I'm thinking maybe the way we kind of do division is to do on the funding and revenue side, we have some work to do to flesh out the A options as we talked about. So that's the money in. Now we have this other discussion, which is the money out and what that contract might look like, the expenses, all of that. So there's two pillars to this in my mind. So how we begin to and they do interrelate at some point, but how we begin to think about presenting the data to say, okay, here are on the expense side, here's what we're looking at and why and what we recommend or the different options. And then on the revenue side, here's what so I'd like to, I think we need to move forward simultaneously on both of those. So in suggesting how we divide the work, it may be that we have a team that's focused on fleshing out those revenue option things that we wanted to say and playing with some numbers there and having scenarios. Then on the other side, I think the detail, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we get into these conversations and we talk about digging in and getting more data, I start to get a little concerned because you are on first with this. I'm not sure we as a group, I mean, I wouldn't want to be in a situation of having to translate information to you. And so I would ask from a staff perspective, how you would think of staffing this. I mean, where's your mind on this right now in terms of how you get the information as Peter is calling for, the more detailed information? Can we in effect run in a kind of, more formalized bid process where we're more specific in what it is we want and ask for more formal bid responses? Can that be done in advance of the meeting in early October where we have to present the revenue issue? I mean, where are you at with this? How do we do
yes, we can, staff, myself, can prepare a request for proposal and send it out to each one of these entities and have them respond back. And so it's a level playing field that sets the uniform standard of service, and they essentially assign a number. Now, not all of them are built the same, and that's what we found out last time. So it's not going to be a simple apples to apples comparison. So they each have their own idiosyncrasies, and that's validated through the numbers that we saw today, where there's some uniformity with Daisy Mountain and Scottsdale, and some things that there were some departures in those numbers, and that deals with the level of service and the policies, procedures that are set by their governing council. So it's not going to be a pure apples to apples comparison. There's going to be some idiosyncrasies that will differentiate between the level of service between each community, or each service provider.
Question, Gary. What do you think the mayor and the council are anticipating from us? For us to say,
the answer,
vendor X, or go forth and do good?
All the above. They want some informed recommendations. They're hoping, this is kind of a ground up approach, not a top down approach. So roll up your sleeves. They would have done this themselves. Every time they do something like this, they're accused of lack of transparency. So let's get a group of citizens together and have them ask the same questions we would ask, whether it be through a series of meetings with these individual entities or in the public light. And, in today's world, you have these public figures and they're trying to do good and make good decisions for their communities, but they're vilified on a consistent basis. I think there's a little shell shock out there. So I think your role is, as citizens who are new to this, and some not so new, Jerry was at this before, is to take your experiences, your thoughts on this issue, and weave those common threads together, and based upon the best information that you have, based upon your own experiences, come together and identify those common threads and make some recommendations to them. That's the exercise that they would have gone through themselves. But having you guys there to assist and drive those answers, I think are a huge lift to the process that will help them make a informed decision in a rapid fashion.
Hey, Gary.
Go ahead, Phil.
Sorry, Leslie. I just had a thought when going back to the property taxes for Carefree. So I believe now if someone purchases a home in Cave Creek, they have an option to pay additional for the rural metro fire protection.
That is correct. There's a subscription service.
Correct.
Not mandatory, it's an option. Yep.
Correct. And I know in Carefree, obviously we don't have to do that with rural metro. It's already included the fire service for our town, correct?
Correct.
So I think one of the nice things when we are presenting for, a property tax, one of the things I think we should mention is the fact that unlike Cave Creek, we do not pay for, the fire protection, but with all the rising costs in a new contract, we are proposing the property tax for Carefree to make sure that we have those, emergency services available. So I just wanted to be clear on that. I was pretty sure that was the case, but I think that's another good point to bring up when we are presenting for property tax.
Now, an important point to address there is Cave Creek is going through a similar process right now, as we all know. Mm-hmm. One of the things that they're thinking about is a similar model to what we have is we own the assets, they contract out, they have a master contract. What they're discussing is a master contract with a Daisy Mountain, perhaps, and what that would look like and what are the costs associated with that. They're also talking funding. And can they do it through sales tax or property tax or a combination of both? I have not heard them say that they will maintain the subscription service. So getting to your point, that in the future most likely will go away in Cave Creek. But one of the things I heard them also say is let's not adopt a model such as Carefree where they're kicking the can down the road and now they're faced with difficult decisions. Right. Let's make that difficult decision right now. So they're trying to reconcile that. And I think within the next month or two, they're going to have some meetings. Their council will have some meetings to discuss that very issue.
I have one question. There's a hole for me. There's the Life Safety Commission that has to, I don't forget what it's called, but they have to approve our incorporation in automatic aid. If we go that way, but we would become part of the Scottsdale or Daisy Mountain system if we partnered with them. Does that cover our life safety issues, or do we have a separate negotiation that we have to undertake with them that might involve some expenses?
There might be some additional expenses. Those have not been identified until they go and see what our assets are and evaluate the level of service here in Carefree. If we partner with Scottsdale, for example, or Daisy Mountain, for example, we would fall under their license, if you will, partnership with automatic aid. And they will tell us what we need to do, they being Scottsdale or Daisy Mountain, to fulfill the requirements of automatic aid and the Life Safety Council. So that will come down from the Life Safety Council to Daisy Mountain or to Scottsdale, and then Scottsdale or Daisy Mountain will forward that on to us.
Okay, so when we get a quote, so if we put out a request for proposal from Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain for automatic aid, then that would be fully baked in then?
Yes.
Okay.
I heard something slightly different from Chief Shannon last time. And so I would be looking for some reassurance that that indeed is the case and that there's not something that we're left to have to do that isn't fully baked in.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Gary,
So,
excuse me. Go ahead, Leslie.
I just wanted to check where we were at here in our conversation. So what you were saying, Gary, is that you feel confident you could run an RFP process between now and the time that we have to pull this all together for a council presentation in early October.
Yes. I will begin to work on a RFP and send that out to each one of the providers. It will outline the level of service and timeline to respond. And we'll have meetings with them to clarify any questions that they might have. So the ball field is level, and we'll evaluate the responses when they come back.
Is it possible in that process for you to share that, the RFP with us before it's fully, is that something you can do legally?
Yeah, let me think about that. It's I got to be careful about letting this out as a public document before we go out to bid.
I understand.
So, yeah.
I understand. Got it.
And it's not really a RFP. We're looking for a request for qualifications. It's level of service that we're looking for. So it's not like you take the lowest bidder. You take the right fit through this process.
Right.
Gary, on the three figures that we had between the departments, was Rural Metro the only one that was a 3-year program? The other ones were a 1 year, and then depending on how the contract reads for increases would be for year 2, year 3, and so forth?
To be fair, I didn't really have those discussions with Scottsdale or Daisy Mountain, just Rural Metro. I would have those conversations with Scottsdale in the future. Bottom line, with each one of these entities, it's a long-term relationship. So they're looking at collectively a minimum of 9 or 10 years. We would look at some type of 3 to 5 year initial term, and then subsequent automatic renewal of those respective terms.
Okay. Is there anything that you would bring back to us on our next meeting on August 11th that we continue this conversation? Is there any bit of, from us?
One of the things that Peter has requested is for Rural Metro to give us some of the statistics for the last 2 years. I see Chief Gilbert on as well as Battalion Chief Roman. Hopefully they can pull that information together so that we can look at that and discuss that. The calls both in Carefree and Cave Creek, then that will indicate the response to the west side as well as into downtown Cave Creek. It won't outline most likely the calls into Scottsdale specifically, and vice versa. So there will be some gaps in that information, but certainly we can get that hopefully to you guys by the next meeting. Looking at
Brian Gilbert saying he's going to get that to us. So
okay, good.
I have I guess I have sort of an expectation that if we stay with mutual aid and we stay with Daisy Mountain, we're going to want them to, they've already sort of verbally assured us that they're going to keep the firehouse on the south side of Cave Creek, the west side of the mountain there, to help us with west side calls. I guess I'd like that to be something that we have contractual, that's mentioned in the contract.
That's an interesting topic because it's kind of a chicken or egg conversation. The reason why I say that is I think Rural Metro would entertain purchasing that and servicing the west side through that station, with the acknowledgement that we will enter a master contract with them. So if we commit, they will commit. So what comes first, our commitment or their commitment? So
I'm okay with jumping off the cliff together. That's okay. As long as...
and then the other part of that is they can't control what that private property owner does. So he's in talks with Cave Creek about that respective station. Will Cave Creek try and buy that station from out underneath Rural Metro? Those are things that we can't control.
Yeah, and the reason I'm interested in having that as part of the RFP process is because there are some uncertainties on their side, and resolving that to our satisfaction might add to the yearly cost, or might add to the quote. They might have to contingent another fire station somewhere, or I don't know what, but it should be part of the conversation. For automatic aid, I'm assuming that our fire department will be dispatched to a lot of to some Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain fires that we don't go to now, because it'll be a dispatch system rather than a phone call. So now we just get a phone call if they really need us, and here we'll just be automatically dispatched. And since we've been told we're a low to moderate use fire department, I'm assuming there's going to be more outflow than incoming, at least in the early years. And I don't know that we have any way to capture that because it's not something we're doing now.
Well, yeah, I had that very thing too, which is our leverage. Peter, did you want to jump in there?
I'm not sure that's true, given the location of Scottsdale stations on the southern border and on the east side. They might be responding to areas faster than we would. And Daisy Mountain, or whoever takes over the Carefree Cave Creek franchise, could be doing the west side of Carefree. And I'm just not sure. I mean, yes, maybe we would go downtown Cave Creek if Daisy Mountain is in Cave Creek to respond there. But I'm wondering what the ratio would be of calls in, how many are coming to us from outside the jurisdiction and how many are we going to? And I don't know.
Yeah, Peter, to be clear, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think that it's likely that we'll get under either automatic aid or mutual aid, we're likely to get fire trucks not from our station, often responding to the west side.
Right.
And that might go up under automatic aid versus mutual aid, or it might not, depending on whether rural metro has that other station there or not. And I also agree that Scottsdale is generally going to be closer to the Scottsdale fires than we are because of where their stations are. But if there's 2 fires and we're the nearest available, it's still, we almost never go there now, I think, but I don't know. I won't know until I see the numbers from rural metro.
Right. And
I was told by Chief Krantz too at a time there that we go there much more than they come here. That was my understanding.
Okay, I would expect that to just increase because it's easier for us to go there if we're just automatically dispatched.
Right. I think also to our advantage a little bit is with rural Metro's contract for the ambulance service for the entire area, they have to locate pretty much somewhere close to where they are on the other side of the mountain in order to provide service. So they would have to have a facility somewhere in that vicinity, whether they have to have a fire station or not. They, like for example, over here where they contract with us to park their vehicle, they have to have a parking on the outside too, if that's my understanding. I believe that's my understanding.
Okay, so we're assuming that their ambulance service would still rent a space from us. I think we decided we couldn't assume that. I don't know, but
yeah, if you went out to an outside agency, I would suspect rural metro would look for a place for cheaper rent. They don't have to be located at a fire station. So, for example, City of Scottsdale, Maricopa Ambulance is the provider. They're not based at any of the Scottsdale firehouses that I know of. They are off in shopping centers and other locations throughout the city of Scottsdale. So it does not have to be located within a firehouse.
Gary, that brings up and somebody mentioned it, I think, Peter, in your comments. So in the RFPs, as you create this, and what I'd like to do is just go around and offer everyone an opportunity to weigh in if there's any burning thoughts, but included in the RFP, RFSQ, whatever it's called, what we would like to see. And I know that issue of how ambulance or emergency services are provided. How is that going to happen under each of those, for each of the respective respondents? So how is that handled? What is their current con? How is that going to be managed? So I'd be interested in understanding that a little more clearly.
Absolutely.
And it's part of that. So that would be mine. Just going around. Kim, would you there's something that you're holding importantly that you want to make sure is included in the thinking?
Well, I definitely, like Anton, I'd like to hear about what is said about the West Side Station and how that'll be handled. So that's been brought up. With regard to rural metro, it would be nice to know a figure that involves current level of service, which they've provided roughly right now, but also maybe some other line item or something that would increase level of service in case it was a decision that we stayed with rural metro instead of going to automatic aid, but increase staff levels potentially, as has been talked about. So potentially just a different line item as if they were to staff up to automatic aid levels.
I think that the point with the rural metro model, since they own the CON here,
that's right.
Carefree,
Okay,
Cave Creek,
sure.
The ambulance automatically responds with the fire truck, and therefore you have 5 responding to an incident rather than just the fire truck.
Yeah. Okay. So disregard that then. Thanks.
I mean, that does bring back Peter's point of maybe we should look at buying the CON, but I sense that that's not something that gets resolved by October.
No.
Depends on what you offer them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything's for sale.
Better increase that tax.
Yeah, well, and I think the other item that we really should get some real quotes on, if we stay with rural metro, what are their thoughts on what we're going to need for possibly a new fire truck and when, and the equipment that would needed to go with that, as well as with the 2 automatic aid providers. I would be curious to their thoughts on our equipment and truck, and if they see, I know obviously if we go with one of them, there's certain things that the existing truck or the new truck's going to need as well. So I think that's a really important item that could go well above 400,000 depending on the type of truck.
And to that point, I did have some good conversations with Chief Gilbert from Rural Metro about our truck and going out to bid and amending the specs that we sent out. And he believes that we can change our specs and get the fire truck down from the 620,000 that it originally came in at to probably 500 to 550,000. So there are ways where we can achieve some savings. So and Chief Gilbert has written specs for Rural Metro for their truck, so he knows it like the back of his palm. So he's very well versed with that.
As far as you know, area, the specs pretty much the same for Scottsdale and Rural Metro.
They vary between the various entities. Scottsdale kind of has the Cadillac of fire trucks, and theirs are about 880,000.
So
when we bought ours, we bought a premium truck, if I recall, and it's paid off for us in the long run, except now they're out of business, can't buy parts.
That is correct, yes.
The same thing, by the way, I don't know if I never know if it's bush truck or brush truck, but I guess I'd like to know all 3 jurisdictions' opinion on whether one should be located here.
We've got one on the other, they have one on the other side of the mountain.
So who does? You mean Rural Metro?
Rural Metro.
Rural Metro does.
Yeah, so their opinion probably will be, no, you don't need one. We'll supply it across the mountain. But and that might be the same answer for Daisy Mountain. I have no idea. I think we should ask the question.
Yes, I know each agency does have brush trucks up in the area.
Okay.
Anton, is there anything else you would add in or like to see that we ask respondents to cover?
I think we've covered everything. I mean, the life safety question is a question, but I assume that they're going to answer that somehow. Either if you respond to this quest, maybe they'll say that we'll negotiate with life safety to make sure you're covered, or maybe they'll tell us we have to negotiate separately. I don't know, but I want to know that. Otherwise, no, I think we covered everything.
Okay. Peter, is there anything you feel strongly we should ask them to respond to?
I don't think so. But for us, how do we get a better understanding of the the cost associated with automatic aid. You know, I understand the dispatch, but I'm still not clear if there is a cost settlement at the end of the year between all the jurisdictions, pluses and minuses, and how that all works out. I don't know.
That's a good question.
And I'd like to know that. And then, no, that's about.
Okay. Yeah, I imagine that with a year-end true up, you know, trying to, because I agree, you know, geographically, we have used the Cave Creek fire station to, you know, do one portion of the mountain versus the other side. And, you know, if say that goes away, that fire station goes away, then, and, you know, say we're with Scottsdale and we have the Scottsdale station out on Cave Creek Road and our fire station, you know, just trying to anticipate how they would be used, who's helping who, really determines, as to Peter's concern, which is very valid, what that true up is going to look like.
If there is a true up.
Yeah,
I've
right.
also heard there is no true up.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So that, because, you know, what we want to avoid is having any surprises in terms of costs. And we want to build in a solid budget, taking everything we know into consideration, and we don't want the surprises, because then that creates a problem for the city. So I would just concur with that. We need to clarify: is there a true up, not a true up?
Right.
You know,
but even so, to Sheila's point, even without a true up, there might be a financial impact that we're missing. For instance, if out of the Carefree Fire Department, we respond to more Scottsdale fires because of the dispatch system, will that cost us money? I assume it does, but maybe it's covered by contract. I don't know that.
Well, I would think that I'm not an expert, but you know, if say we were with Scottsdale, you know, we're pretty much all in this together and helping each other. So I don't see how us helping another city, and thus someone please correct me if I'm wrong, is going to actually cost us money. I mean, our station can only do, it's only a certain amount of people, so they can only be in, you know, one place at a time.
Yes.
And if they're used.
I was thinking more of incidental costs, like we get extra maintenance because our fire trucks are on the road a lot more, and we pay more fuel costs because we're driving a lot more, that kind of thing. Not big money, just little things.
Okay. No, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Well, you will have to pay dispatch fees, as I understand it.
Right.
Every time you're dispatched, whether it's to your jurisdiction or some other jurisdiction, you have to pay a dispatch fee, about $28, I believe.
Yes, and they projected out for the year. So let's say that it was 750, you would pay a flat fee. And my understanding is they will, if you overpaid, they will credit you that amount back. But if you underpaid, then they increase the amount for the subsequent fiscal year.
Okay.
So that's my understanding of the true up. Yeah, Anton, you're correct in that there are ancillary costs associated with responding to adjacent jurisdictions through the wear and tear of our equipment that we own, but yet it's responding to an outside entity. And similar, you know, we admit that Scottsdale in some cases is a lot closer than our own fire station to various neighborhoods in town. They will be responding to. So that's where we just share on the cost of maintaining our own equipment.
I think we're a good test case on this automatic aid versus mutual aid, because the council is going to have to go through a similar process and understand this. So getting this clarified clearly as part of this is going to be really important, because we certainly heard a lot and had the opportunity over the last couple of months to hear this, and we still have questions. So somehow we need to come up with a communication plan for how we can simplify this and make it clear so that you know, others can also grasp it and get it.
And similar to that, I think even with the mutual aid, we've heard that Rural Metro says they're going to keep a Cave Creek station to serve the county island and somebody else, I don't know who, but what kind of resources will they have to deploy here? I mean, we have been very much relying upon Rural Metro Cave, I guess, to some extent, to handle the west side. If we're going with Rural Metro, but not automatic aid, do we have the same kind of coverage? Are we going to get the same kind of response time? Do they call in the kind of assets at their disposal that automatic aid? I'd like to get kind of a sense of the difference in service level between just an automatic Scottsdale's going to roll an engine and Rural Metro, maybe the engine's engaged someplace. Does it have to come from Cave Creek if they maintain that station, or does it have to come from Rio Verde, or does it have to come from Peoria or wherever else they have coverage? I'd just like to know how that's positioned.
Yeah, I will remind everyone that based on the numbers that we were shown a couple meetings ago, there are not that many actual fire calls. They're mostly medical calls.
Yeah, there's
so the number of times when when a fire truck is not, nearest fire truck's not available is probably not that large, but it could be on those few cases where it does happen, the difference could be large.
And kind of along the same token here, as we're discussing this, let's say we ended up with auto aid. Life Safety Council, what would be our requirement? Would we need to capitally fund 2 fire stations, the personnel for 2, a truck for 2, or is it okay for Carefree to have 1 and then rely on its partners for the others? It's a
similar community as far as level of service is Tolleson.
Okay.
They have 1 fire station, and they're part of the automatic aid pack. So it all depends upon the density, the size of the community.
That's what I was thinking, the population, right? Yeah.
Correct. Okay. And then, you know, how the other assets are distributed around the community itself. So, you know, they don't want us to be a draw on the overall system. And I think our 1 fire station is positioned to complement the level of service. And when I say complement the level of service, it's the time to respond to an incident. And the way ours is located, it's pretty good spacing up the other stations.
It sounds like in the RFP that what we're doing, we need to probably do clearly is define our geographic boundaries and what we're seeking for service that covers and make sure that all Carefree residents have the fire service. So how they do that, they come back to us and say how they're going to ensure that and what it's going to cost, right? So that becomes part of their response.
Correct.
Yeah. I just want to double check, Phil and Jerry, we haven't quite gotten to you yet. I didn't want to, in terms of any thoughts about what you wanted to make sure you know, would be in a RFSQ.
Oh, I think that we've pretty much covered the whole story at this point.
Okay.
And, you know, my thoughts are, you know, again, with having to go through a vote and the timing of getting that vote up for a property tax, which I think as a general consensus, we all agree is going to probably be the, I don't know what right way to say it, fairest way to raise money for these new contracts and services. But, you know, I'm still going to be curious once all the numbers come in and we propose the property tax, if it is going to be enough, in fact, to keep it, or if we are going to have to consider, although it doesn't seem like it's a majority vote, that we may have to consider a possible sales tax increase either in the beginning and then drop it, or, you know, add it in a couple years later. So I'll be curious once all the numbers come in and we have a good idea as a committee of what we're really looking at, and can the proposed property tax cover it? And I think that's what we should have when we propose the property tax, to cover it as the sole revenue, and stay away from the sales tax if possible. But if not, there might be some sort of combination that's going to be needed.
You hardly ever see a tax that goes in that disappears at a time in the future. I think that we have to pretty much consider that if we impose a tax, we got a tax. And, you know, it's nice to think that way, but politicians have a way of finding a way to spend a few extra dollars.
I'll have to agree with that.
So, yeah.
I guess not for the request for proposals or quotation, but for the October presentation to the town council, I'm wondering whether one of the options that we consider would be imposing a property tax a year later. I mean, they might have reasons to not want to put it on the ballot right away. I don't know. I have no idea about that, actually. I'm just wondering. Gary, do you have any insight to that? Would the timing of the property tax make it be something that they'd want to think about?
Well, the question has to go on the ballot in, I believe, May. They have to adopt the resolution, I believe, and this was new information to me, in December. And that's the ballot question in December. We do have some time to discuss this and reconcile our thoughts, and have the council also discuss this, and you know, have conversations with the community.
So, did we just get 3 months?
Yes, we did. And that's came to me from our town clerk, Candace. And Candace, you're online. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at December.
Okay.
He's muted, but that's great.
Wow, that's really great. Well, shoot, that's a game changer. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, then we can like kind of relax.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take 2 months off.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well,
kicking the can down the road, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Let's not act like a government agency and kick the can down the road. Yeah.
What I wanted to suggest, just as a, you know, kind of a lead into future agenda items, was that you're going forward, Gary, you're going to put together the RFSQ, get more detailed data that we will then have some time now to really work with and take a look at, correct? In terms of, so they're going to respond back. How will this committee be involved in the review of those responses?
What will happen is I will pass those responses to you guys. You guys will have time to review those responses, and we will have some score sheets for you guys, and then we can collectively meet and review your thoughts on each one of the responses. Okay. Okay, great. So that's on that side. Any questions with that? Y'all good with that? So when, I mean, just generally, do you think we'll be back with information to do that when? Probably need about 4 weeks to get this RFQ in place and then send it out to them. Probably need, I'd say 3 to 4 weeks for them to respond.
So we're in second half of September then.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Good. Okay.
Okay. So we're looking probably when that, in terms of how our meeting schedule, it's probably that first meeting in October that we have that we'll
Yes.
have. Okay. So that's on that side of the house. The other side of the house was this discussion about our revenue models and proposals for on the revenue side. Now that's something that I think we can, you know, continue to dive into. Would it be useful next meeting to have a focus on fleshing out those options? Kim, you had made a suggestion maybe about dividing up in terms of smaller groups, that's possible too. But if we have this time frame now, maybe we have the luxury of doing that together as a group. What do you think?
Well, I think we have the foundation for that. What we're lacking is the real numbers.
Yeah.
You know, to have the final number of revenues. I mean, we have the options of property tax, sales tax, all in property tax. You know, we know just based on the general numbers that Peter put together, what we could potentially raise based on these levels, but what we don't know is what we need to raise.
Right. And we might just arbitrarily, you know, given the data we have had, kind of pick a target, but look at the impact of different options on a total. Like, you know, what would be the max if we used option A? What would be the max that could be generated under one option versus another? Pros and, you know.
We've already done that.
I think that's already done. The only thing that you could go, the only thing you can go farther with is, I don't think you even have to do that. We even know that if you plan right now, if you put the model you have is we do a property tax, we discontinue the sales tax, I believe. Is that right, Sheila?
That's option one.
Well, so we have the one option where it's just under $1 property tax that will work together though with the sales tax. If we wanted to go for full on property tax, it's $1.66, $1.67.
Okay.
And that would be for, I mean, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be for the full assumed cost
of how many million? I'm sorry, is that?
Yeah.
3 million.
3 million.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
3 million. Thank you.
And we also know that if we do the full on cost of $1.67 and we discontinue the property tax a year later, we've got 1.2 million that we've raised.
Sales tax.
Sales tax.
Sales tax. Discontinue the sales tax a year later, we've got 1.2 million that we've raised for things like fire trucks or whatever. We know that. So we know those numbers already. I think, we just need to know how much money we need and how to apply it.
Yeah. It's like a negotiation. Every state gets 2 senators, you know. Why 2? Vermont's not as big as Maricopa County. Why do they get 2? Gary, is it appropriate that we approach the Life Safety Council and get an assessment of our equipment and, I mean, what they think we bring to the table in terms of, we've been looking to get a brush truck up in that area. I don't know, but is it appropriate for us to do that?
I will attempt to do that. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. You're not supposed to be looking behind the curtain there.
Yeah.
So I don't know who to contact with the Life Safety Council and how to contact them. It's a secret.
It's a secret number.
It's a secret fraternity, and they don't give out the key. So I will do my best to figure that how to crack that nut.
Just for starters, you know that Scottsdale and Daisy Mountain will talk to you, so you can ask them what they think the way forward is here.
So let me test this again. Right now, what I think I'm hearing you all say is that we could describe and define 3 revenue proposals that we could put before the council with an arbitrarily set $3 million, whatever you want to use.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that today.
Okay.
The real question is, do we want to go, we're going through this whole RFP so that by the time we get to council, they're dealing with pretty hard numbers.
Right,
But I mean, otherwise we could write the report right now and come up with 3 options and say an assumed cost of 3 million and 1.5 for capital, and you could be done. You can start drafting right now, Leslie.
I think we should. I think we should get some of this put to bed. So then we, at least, I mean, very clearly, so that we can plug and play if numbers change in the conversation. But
yeah, we could also, we're also at the point where we could use the numbers that were given to us by the 3 fire agencies and plug in 3 different property value numbers.
Right.
or 3 sales tax numbers, but I think we've kind of agreed we can't go there.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So my question is, how do we make the use then, good use of our next meeting time, which is scheduled for August 11th? Do we want to?
I would just like to be, and it might not take the entire time, but I would like to understand, unless it's very simple, I'd like to better understand the financial operations of automatic aid. But if that can be written down in a sentence, then we can just email it out. But if there's this reconciliation, what if it's imbalanced between jurisdictions? Somebody's sending twice as many calls into the next jurisdiction. How does the group address that? I'd just like to get a firmer handle on that, and like to get some discussion of, if we're going with automatic aid, what's the elevator pitch to the guy at the grocery store as to why this is a grand idea?
So to that point, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 folks, maybe 6 folks from Daisy Mountain on the line. I would ask them to respond to that question in written form and email it to me, and I will disseminate it to the committee members.
That's the elevator pitch you're asking for?
There we go.
Great.
You might have to take a trip up and down, but
yeah,
a little longer than that.
So that's where we have a passive role of calling for information, right? Unless there's anything for discussion that prompts, right? Mm-hmm. Anything else? Do we take a stab? I imagine.
I think our next meeting ought to be on the fire truck. We ought to get real life experience and go down out on a call and get to blow the cord and turn on the lights. Come on, there's got to be some upside to this.
Somebody didn't have a party at the firehouse growing up.
I think we do have an invitation, standing invitation to Daisy Mountain Fire.
Okay.
And, you know, I don't know if we're ready to do the in-person thing, and to Gary, I've kind of left the interface with the various providers up to you, right?
Yes. So obviously the invitation's out from both Rural Metro and our respective firehouse, and I think that's important because you can see all the equipment that we have there, and I think that's critical for you guys to know that we have an exceptional firehouse with an exceptional level of equipment there that supports the community. That I feel very confident. There are very few things that we need to qualify for automatic aid based upon what I know and have experienced with these other firehouses. But Daisy Mountain has also suggested, and you can see the text there, that they will also facilitate a meeting. So if you guys want those meetings at those respective firehouses, we can arrange that as well too. And maybe that's something that we do at our next meeting. So that's always an option.
I would offer, because I'll be on the ground in Carefree on August 11th. And if we can use their community room also, if we could just set it up so we could do a tour for anybody who couldn't join us, but maybe if we could schedule that room for those that could join in person. How do you feel about that, Gary? What's the town policy?
We're slowly starting to have in-person meetings. So yes, we can certainly put something together at our firehouse in our community room, and then do something perhaps subsequently at Daisy Mountain and or City of Scottsdale.
Okay, well, why don't we do that?
Get that garage door fixed.
Yes, it's in the process. Pandemic, it's left parts hard to find, so they're on order.
Can we leave that with you then to check with the Rural Metro folks and see if August 11th would be available for us, and for those of us that are on the ground in town to be able to join in person if we'd like. For those that can't, that one of us just walk around with our laptop so they can participate at any tour.
That'll be great. I'll be out of town, but I'd love to walk around with you on a virtual.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be out of town back on the East Coast the 11th, but any other future meetings outside, I'll be able to join.
Okay. Well, I confess I need to sit with this thing where we've suddenly been gifted 3 extra months. We rarely have found time anymore. So I know I'm kind of thinking, oh, okay, so how do we make the best use of our time? So I know I have to sit with that a little bit more, but it sounds like we have a plan for our August 11th meeting that'll carry us forward.
And I just got a message that August 11th works for Chief Gilbert. So we can meet at our fire station.
Okay, and then maybe our second meeting in August. I forget when that is, but we could, or in the 25th, 25th, I think.
25th, yes.
Maybe we can talk to Daisy Mountain if they, just to give equal coverage. Okay. I have one almost on a personal note thing I want to insert here because I don't know where it fits into the conversation, but I have to share this thing. A couple weeks ago, I looked out my kitchen window in Carefree, and there was a fire truck in our community. I live in a townhome community, and of course, you check it out. We're a small area, and we're close as neighbors. And it was a snake call. So there was a fire truck and 4 fire personnel that responded to get a snake that somebody called for around our pool. Then I come to find out that this is the 3rd time in as many weeks that this call has been made. And it did occur to me that I wasn't sure in terms of assets and resources, if that, just how much that was happening in the community, and wondering if that was the best use. I just had to question whether there was other ways for us to do snake mitigation than a very expensive truck and 4 fire personnel to respond to.
Yeah.
Well,
it is a service that most fire departments provide because it's better to catch the snake than be bitten by the snake. There were 77 calls last year for snake removal. So I think it's something that also presents a friendly face of the firefighters out in the community too. So it's kind of one of those public services that, you can't really put a price to.
Yeah,
okay.
You might be able to, maybe we can buy a snake truck so they don't have to spend as much.
That's what I thought. I thought maybe we just need, maybe just a more fuel efficient vehicle. Yeah.
We need a snake sheriff.
Yeah. Yes. Anyway, okay, that's my deal. Anything else as we come to a close? Oh, I did want to say, Gary, thank you. You had also shared, I think, in the interim, some language on potential resolutions for property tax. So we have some templates from other Arizona communities that have put this before their town councils for vote. So I don't know at what point, maybe now we can wait till later in the fall when we are a little clearer, but we can be ready with some language. Is that right? Is that what you were thinking?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
When will you have the first draft of the report?
I'm working on it right now, Peter.
I was talking to Leslie.
So I'll be on the ground, Gary. Maybe you and we can have that conversation. Seriously. Okay. And I'll be on the ground after the 9th.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you once again. And again, I thank you, Peter and Sheila, for your wonderful work, and for Sheila for the presentation. I wanted to invite you both. I noticed both on the presentation and on the report, Peter, that you put together, that your names aren't on there. And I think you deserve the credit on this. And I would invite you, unless you have reasons of your own for not, that you are the authors of these things. And it would, I think, be nice to have your names attached to that. So
just a staff report.
Yeah, right. I think you've been in those trenches too long, Peter. You are now an esteemed, you're on the other side. So anyway, I just a thought. I think it's important, but again, my thanks and acknowledgement to you both for that work.
You're welcome.
Yeah, great job.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
Have a good weekend.
Always. Pleasure as always. See you on the 11th.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.